Michael Hingson, welcome back to the show, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and you?
I'm doing great. I see this time around you have Mike, so it's AKA Mike.
You can use either one.
Yeah, which one do you prefer?
Well, since you asked the question, now you have to hear the story. I used to always say Mike Hingson when I was talking to people on the phone, and I never could understand why they said Mr. Kingson when they responded, because I said Mike Hingson, and I just figured, why are they saying Kingson instead of Hinkson? So as I tell people, it took a master's degree in physics, a secondary teaching credential, and 10 years in sales before I finally figured out that if I said Michael Hinkson, they would say the Hinkson part right. So I started saying Michael Hinkson, but I don't care which. You're welcome to use Mike if you'd like, or you can use Michael. I'm
Yeah.
easy.
Okay, Mike. Let's go, Mike.
Perfect.
Yeah, so for the listeners, we are celebrating another friend anniversary. This is the second appearance that Mike has come on to the Kino podcast, and it's a pleasure to have you back, man.
Well, thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here again.
Yeah, thanks for making the time to come back on. So, how's your day so far?
It's good. I've been working now for about 4 hours. It's a little after 10 in the morning, California time, where I live, and I usually get in the office between 6 and 6:30. So I've been busy.
Yeah, clearly, and you're a morning person.
Yeah, I've always been more of a morning person because a lot of times when I worked for some companies that were based on the East Coast, and when I was living on the West Coast working for them, I had to be up early anyway, so I'm used to it.
Yeah. I'm the same. The morning is your transformational period.
It's
That's
quieter.
when your best ideas come to light, and that's when you get like the most important things that matter to you most done. Whereas after 12 p.m., it's like transactional. Let me do all the nitty gritty stuff.
I worked for a company in California, and I lived in California, and I was asked to do work with the East Coast. So I was the first person into the company every morning at 6 in the morning. And it was great because I was in mostly for at least an hour before anyone else arrived. So I got so much more done. So I like the morning. You get so much done in the morning, as you point out.
Yeah. I remember there was a movie I watched once, and the guy said in the movie he likes to be the first one up because he's getting the best ideas first.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
True.
yeah. Very true. So, as I did mention, it is your second appearance back on the show, and we will be touching on a completely separate topic tonight, where I am. But before we continue, I want to just give, the listeners a brief summary of what Mike and I discussed 1 year ago. And I will tag the first show on Spotify, and there will be a link to the first show in the description on YouTube. Now, Mike, your story the first time around was absolutely inspiring. You are a 9/11 survivor turned New York Times best-selling author. And just by mentioning these key points that we talked about 1 year ago is so motivating. So I'm going to give that summary, and for listeners who want to jump onto the first episode to, take a deep dive into Mike's life, please do so. So we first touched on your early life and blindness. Born 2 months premature, placed in an incubator with pure oxygen, which caused the blindness. The doctors told your parents to take you home and that you will never be of any value to society, but your parents refused and raised you to believe you could accomplish anything you want. We spoke about family support and mindset. Your parents instilled in you that blindness, wasn't the problem. Societal attitudes towards blindness were. You grew up believing you could achieve whatever you chose. We spoke about your Boy Scouts journey. became an Eagle Scout and achieved the highest rank in the Order of the Arrow. We spoke about your first job and graduation, your layoff and pivot in your career. You were laid off from a company but was offered a position in sales, accepted despite having no sales experience, recognizing the high unemployment rate among blind people at the time, which was 70%, and you successfully transitioned from science to sales. We spoke about 9/11. You was on the 78th floor when the plane hit and learned emergency evacuation procedures in advance, escaped with his guide dog, Roselle. I'm still saying the name correct, Roselle,
Yes. Yes.
who showed no fear, clearly, which helped you to stay calm and you managed to get out of the building. We spoke about, okay, I'm not going to mention this point because that's what this show is actually about. We spoke about your full-time speaking career after 9/11. People began paying him to speak about his experience, transition from selling computer hardware to full-time keynote speaking, focusing on trust, teamwork, and overcoming adversity. You mentioned everyone has a disability. You argued that disability is a universal characteristic, not a lack of ability. You use the example of sighted people panicking when the lights go out, proof that everyone has dependence on light. Fear as a tool teaches that fear can be controlled and used as a motivator, emphasizing introspection and daily self analysis to understand what worked and what didn't and how to improve. We spoke about your latest book at the time, which was called Live Like a Guide Dog, which people can learn about in the first episode. We spoke about your podcast, which is titled Unstoppable Mindset Podcast. So you host a podcast where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet, records 2 episodes per week with over 323 episodes published. Now, that was at the time. I'm sure that number has grown.
Yeah, we actually published episode 440 last Friday.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
You gave advice to creators, encouraging self-reflection, listening to your inner voice, and not overthinking. And your closing message for last year's show, which was so impactful, and I quote, "I am my own best teacher, not my own worst critic." Encouraging choosing to move forward and succeed by controlling what you can and not worrying about what you can't. I actually mentioned that to someone today, who was getting like all worked up and the anxiety was kicking in. And I'm like, look, we can only control what's in front of us. So let's just take a deep breath, get what's in front of us done. We'll worry about what's to come when we cross that bridge.
Right.
It's such an important lesson in life. Stop worrying about what you can't control.
Absolutely true. You're totally correct.
Yeah. So that was a slight recap summary of what Mike and I discussed in episode 1. As I said, I will tag it on Spotify and I will have the link to the description on YouTube. So, Mike, I just want to share my screen for a second. So we are here today to talk about your book, Thunder Dog. So I'm going to hand it over to you and you can take it away. And yeah, whatever you feel like telling us about the book, please do go ahead.
So when September 11th happened, and then people started asking me to come and speak to their organizations, it wasn't something that I thought I was going to do. But we got so many calls that my wife and I, by the time the beginning of 2002 arrived, we decided that selling life and philosophy was a whole lot more fun and rewarding, satisfying, and so on, than selling computer hardware and being a computer hardware sales manager, which is what I've been doing in the World Trade Center on September 11th, because I had opened an office for a company on the 78th floor So people started asking us to come. And by the beginning of 2002, I decided I was going to do that full time. And I'd also been hired and asked to work for the school where I've gotten all of my guide dogs, namely Guide Dogs for the Blind, which is a school in Northern California. And so we moved back to California and actually moved to the Bay Area up near San Francisco. We moved to what's called the North Bay to a town called Novato. And I started to speak. And I also worked at Guide Dogs for the Blind, helping by being their public spokesperson, their national public affairs director. And so, um, one thing that happened near the end of 2002 was that the American Kennel Club wanted to honor Roselle, and we were invited to go to the American Kennel Club Canine Yukonuba Dog Championship, which was a dog show in Orlando, Florida, and we were invited to bring Roselle down so that she could be properly awarded a medal. And so we did. But while I was there, I met a gentleman whose name was George Berger. George was at the time, publisher of the American Kennel Club Gazette. And in the course of our conversations, George said, "You should write a book." I hadn't thought of writing a book. Wasn't something that was on my radar scope, but he was really adamant that I should do it. And so I thought about it, and he said, "And I've got an agent who can help." Well, I started making notes and writing down things that I thought ought to go in the book, and slowly build up a fairly large Word file, Microsoft Word file of notes. Um, George's agent wanted me to write a business book. I didn't want to write a business book. I wanted to write a book that would be a general book for the public. And I had some goals for the book. I wanted to teach people about blindness, as we've talked about already. I wanted to tell our story, and I wanted to pass on lessons that I learned and that people were wanting to learn about September 11th and what to do in kind of adverse situations like that. Well, so I started working and writing a lot of information down, but the book wasn't coming together. But in 2010, kind of in May or June of 2010, on a Sunday afternoon, I received a phone call from a woman who identified herself as Susie Flory. And Susie said that she was writing a book called Dog Tales. And Dog Tales was going to be 17 chapters long. And each chapter was going to be about a dog, um, and basically unique dogs with unique stories. And she wanted Roselle to be one of the dogs featured in Dog Tales. I said, "That sounds interesting." And so I thought that was kind of cool. And she said, "Well, would you tell me your story?" So I spent about 45 minutes telling her the entire story of what happened to us on September 11th. And when I was done, there was a pause on the phone, and she said, "You need to write a book." And so I told her what I just mentioned to you about how I kind of started and what George Berger had recommended and so on. But I wanted it to be a general book, and they were more thinking of a business book. And Susie said, "Well, I'd like to work with you. I'm a professional writer. I've got an agent, and we should talk with him and look at writing a book." Well, Susie introduced me to her agent, Chip McGregor. And Chip, um, when we started talking, said, "I want to make one thing really clear. I don't want another September 11th book." And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Because there's so many of those." And I said, "Well, that's really good because I don't want to write another September 11th book. I want to write a book that talks about some other things. I want to talk about, of course, my story, but I want to talk about blindness, being a blind person. I want to talk about lessons that we should learn and talking about other things than just being about September 11th." One of the things that I had thought about in writing the book was that every chapter would start with something that was happening on September 11th, and then we would transition back to events in my life that prepared me to deal with that particular event, whatever it was. And then at the end of the chapter, we would come back to September 11th and we would transition and we would go on. Anyway, so Susie and I wrote a proposal. We sent it off to Chip. And the next day after Chip got the proposal and read it, we were all talking on the phone. And he was just incredibly excited. He said, "This is perfect. It's not a September 11th book. It really is a great story. I'm sure I can sell this." And within a week, we had a signed contract with Thomas Nelson Publishing. Thomas Nelson was the largest Christian publisher in the world. And now it's part of HarperCollins, but at that time it was the largest publisher of Christian material in the world. And there were reasons why our book fit into that. So we started writing it in earnest. And by the end of 2010, we pretty much had a book, and we sent it to the appropriate editors at Thomas Nelson to look at. And Chad at Thomas Nelson called one day and he said, "Well, I really like this." He said, "My job as an editor is not to rewrite your book, but to tell you how to make it as strong as possible, because you people have to be the ones to write it." He said, "There's one problem that really faces me with the book that I'm concerned about." He said, "You transition from September 11th back to events in your life, and then you transition back." But he said, "The transitions are sudden. I get lost. You're suddenly in one place and then you're in another place, and I'm getting lost. And that's not good. Transitions aren't easy to do." And I'm only saying that because that's what he said. Well, I said, as I thought about it, and as he described a couple of examples, I said, "I hear what you're saying. I'm going to take the weekend and I will fix the transitions." Because Susie and I wrote this as a collaborative book. She didn't write it. I didn't write it. We wrote it together. I happen to believe in collaboration, and I think in all of the books that I've written, they've been with other people, and I think that really enhances them. Live Like a Guide Dog was written with Carrie Wyatt Kent. Running with Roselle, which is a book more for youth, was written by me and Jeanette Hanscom. Anyway, so Susie and I were writing this, but I said, I will go work on the transitions. And this was early in 2011. And I took a weekend and I went through and looked at every chapter, and I created transitions to move people easily from September 11th back to things that happened in my life, and then move them back at the end of each chapter back to September 11th and finished up whatever was going on in that event, and then transition them to the next chapter. So we sent all that back up to Thomas Nelson, and they said, "We love it. This is great. This is exactly what I wanted to see." And so they began working on it, and they actually were the ones who created the title Thunderdog. I wanted to call it Forward because that's the first basic guide dog command, and that's what I did after September 11th. But they really liked Thunderdog, and they convinced me to try that, and I agreed. Clearly, it was a good idea. Anyway, so we worked on it, and we had over the next several months, as reviewers were reviewing the book for publishers and magazines and libraries and so on. They liked the transitions, so that was a good thing. But then the book was actually published, and I think it was like the 2nd of August in um, 2011 that it was published. Roselle had passed away in June of 2011, and I had written a eulogy to Roselle that was published on Facebook. And as books were being printed, I learned publishers didn't print as many books up front. They would have several printings. Well, by the third printing came out, which was a little bit later, by the third printing, the obituary, the eulogy that I wrote to Roselle was put into Thunderdog, which was something I didn't even know was going to happen, but that was kind of cool. But anyway, on the 11th of August, so 9 days after it was published, my wife and I and others were sitting around our house, and we got a call from Thomas Nelson, from the all the people who have been involved with the book. And they said, "Well, we got to tell you something. We're really concerned about this. We got to tell you, you got to be sitting down to hear it." And I said, "Well, Karen's sitting down. Does that count?" And of course, they all knew that Karen was in a wheelchair. She was in a chair her whole life. They said, "Well, but you got to be sitting down too." Well, I was sitting down, but I didn't say that. So waited a second. Then I said, "Okay, I'm sitting down." And the next words out of their mouth were that in its first week out, Thunderdog is on the New York Times bestseller list. It was a bestseller book the first week out. It was eventually for 1 week, it was the #1 New York Times bestseller book, but it was a bestseller book. And that was really pretty exciting. And Thunderdog has been going ever since. So the story is about what happened to me in the World Trade Center. It's about getting out. Um, it's also about blindness. And about all the things that happened to me and that I had to deal with around the World Trade Center, and the things in life that prepared me for being able to um, be in the World Trade Center, whether I realized it or not. So I learned about things like when I was 7, I rode my own bike for the first time. I learned how to ride a bike and rode around my neighborhood. I was brave enough to do that. And I learned that I was going to have to decide what I was going to allow myself to do. And either I was going to be part of the world or I wasn't. And of course, my parents helped with that. But those are the kinds of lessons that we learned. One of the most important lessons that came out of Thunderdog and the whole story was something that I don't always talk about, but I will here. When we got out of the building, we um, we being me, Roselle, and David Frank, who was a colleague who was in that day from our corporate office in California. David was there because we were going to be holding some seminars teaching people how to sell our products, and David was in charge of pricing and distribution. Uh, Pricing, so he was going to be talking to the people about that. Excuse me, I was going to be talking about all the technical aspects of the product because I was in the area, was going to be their main point of contact. Anyway, well, so David was there to talk about pricing and so on. Well, so David and I and Roselle got out, all of our guests got out ahead of us. And we walked over to Broadway, and then we walked up on Broadway, and we stopped at a street called Vesey Street because we were close to Tower 2, and David wanted to take pictures of what he was seeing, the fire in Tower 2. We didn't even know why at the time there was fire in Tower 2. It was long before we learned that aircraft had been hijacked and crashed into the towers. So we stopped and David was taking pictures. I tried to call my wife, Karen. I had talked to her before we left the complex, before we left our office, but I wasn't able to reach her because the circuits were busy. And it was later we learned, of course, that that was because people were saying goodbye to loved ones up in the towers, and that we just couldn't get through in the circuits. Anyway, I had just put my phone away, and David was putting his camera away when a police officer yelled, "Get out of here! It's coming down now!" We heard this rumble that I describe as kind of a combination of a freight train and a waterfall sound. It was the sound of metal crashing, glass breaking, then the white noise sound of Tower 2, which was like about 100 yards away from us. It's a 400-yard tall building. We were hearing the sound of Tower 2 collapsing. Well, David turned and just ran away. Other people turned and ran. I literally picked up Roselle by the harness, turned her 180 degrees, and started running back the way we had come to get away from Tower 2. And as I started to run, I said to myself, God, I can't believe that you got us out of a building just to have it fall on us. Now, I've always been a firm believer in God, and so it was a serious conversation. Well, I said that, God, I can't believe that you got us out of a building just to have it fall on us. And as soon as I said that, I heard in my head, as clearly as you hear my voice right now, I heard a voice that said, "Don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on running with Roselle, and the rest will take care of itself." And I had this absolute sense of confidence and conviction that if we worked together, we were going to be fine. And we continued to run. We got back to the street that we had crossed a little while ago, which was Fulton Street. We turned right on Fulton Street to try to get some buildings a little bit more between us and the breakup of Tower 2 because material was falling all around us. We ran about 25 yards and caught up to David. It turns out that's the way he had gone. And David had realized somewhere along the line that he had just run off and left me, and he was going to try to come back and find me, but I found him first, so we continued to run. And we ran, and we were engulfed in the dust cloud, all the dirt and debris and the fine, small particles of Tower 2's collapse. We knew we had to get out of that because, as David pointed out, he couldn't even see his hand 6 inches in front of his nose. I can tell you with every breath that I took, I could feel stuff going down my throat into my lungs. And so we were trying to get out of that, and I started telling Roselle, right, right because we were running next to a building on our right hand side. Fulton Street was on our left, and I kept giving Roselle hand signals, right, right, and telling her to go right. I don't know whether she could hear me or she could even see the hand signals. But suddenly I heard an opening on my right, and Roselle must have known what I wanted because she turned right. She took one step, she stopped, and she wouldn't move. Come on, Roselle, keep going. She wouldn't move. Come on, Roselle, you got to do it. Keep going. She wouldn't move. And I realized focus on running with Roselle and the rest will take care of itself, which was really all about focus on working together as a team and things will be okay. And I realized Roselle obviously stopped for a reason. So I
Mm.
reached my hand along the wall that we were next to, and I also stuck out a foot and discovered we were at the top of a flight of stairs. Roselle did exactly what she was supposed to do, which was to come up to the stairs and stop, which she did. So she got a hug for that. But then I told her to go forward, which is the right command. And she walked down the stairs confidently and without any difficulty. We walked down 2 flights of stairs and found ourselves in what was an arcade entrance way to the Fulton Street subway station. There were some people there, including a woman who was crying and saying, I can't see, my eyes are full of dirt, somebody help me. I ended up being close to her after we got down into the arcade area. I reached out, I took her arm and I said, hey, don't worry. My name is Mike. I'm blind, but I know where we are, and you're like 10 or more feet away from the stairs going down into the subway station. You're really okay. You're safe. Clean out your eyes. You'll be okay. Um, and I guess she started to do that. And then a gentleman came up the stairs from the subway system further down. He introduced himself as Lou, an employee of the subway system. And there were about 8 or 9 of us. He said, come with me. I'll take you all to an employee locker room because he was an employee of the subway. He took us downstairs into an employee locker room. There were some other people there, and we were all just hacking, trying to clear our lungs and so on. And the woman who had been crying before we went down the stairs, I said, can you see or do you want me to help you? And she said, no, I can see now. She introduced herself as Carol. I introduced myself as Mike. Anyway, we all went downstairs and we went into the locker room and we stayed there for a while until a police officer came and said that we needed to leave the area because the air was clear up above and we couldn't stay where we were. And we left. But that conversation with God is extremely important because what it really taught me was something that I have been saying basically ever since, and you alluded to it, Kino, a little while ago. Don't worry about what you can't control. And that's one of the basic themes of Live Like a Guide Dog also. Don't worry about what you can't control. 95% or more of the things that we worry about are things over which we don't have any control, but we still worry about them. We get frightened by them. We allow them to make us more fearful when what we should really do is it's okay to be aware of them, but don't be afraid of them. You don't have any control over them. And if they're going to affect you, you still don't have any control, at least at the point in time you're thinking about. So focus on the things over which you truly have control because you'll find that you fear a whole lot less and your life will be a whole lot better. And so for the last 24 and a half years, I've been talking to people about don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on the things that you can control and let the rest take care of itself. You'll be a lot better for it if you do. So that's the story. And
Yeah. What?
that's in Thunderdog.
Yeah. What a story. I mean, you could probably write a whole book in the lead up to just getting the book published and what happened there. That can become a whole nother book.
Yeah.
Then you were explaining, how, what happened until it finally got released. Yeah, but what a story, I just want to add on what you said about, what we can and can't control and God. It makes me think of something else I told someone else today as well, is that there's people that pray, but they pray with no faith, or they speak to God, but they speak to God with no faith. Now, God needs you to have faith. I'm also a firm believer in God. And, when I pray, I need to have faith. He needs me to have faith. If you're not going to have faith in God, then how do you expect to get the help that you actually desire?
Well, it's even more interesting than that. Most people pray a lot. And what are prayers? Well, their prayers are they're talking to God. They're telling God what they want, what they need, or what they think they need. And the problem is God already knows that. That's not really going to help. um, we ought to be seeking guidance. We ought to be seeking um, the help that we need. But I don't need God to tell me that I need $1 million. I don't know whether I need $1 million or not. I want to have enough money to be able to live and survive and so on. I'd like a cushion, but God already knows how I feel about that. And so I don't need to tell that to God. The problem is what prayer ought to be a whole lot more of than it is listening. If we would really listen, the reality is we we can hear God telling us how to deal with what we really need to deal with. It's that inner voice that we don't pay attention to, and it's something that is so important. When we talked about earlier, and you mentioned I'm my own best teacher, not my own worst critic. I'm my own best teacher because I've learned to listen to my inner voice. I've learned to listen to those things that are inside of me telling me what and how to deal with different things that come along. And if I listen for those messages and I truly listen to them, then I will be a lot better off. My favorite example of that is there's a game, it's now been around for, gosh, a long time, called Trivial Pursuit. Have you ever played Trivial Pursuit?
No, no.
Okay, so it's a game, um, and basically there are cards with questions, and you score points when you answer the questions correctly. And I noticed that a lot of times when I play it, and when I've talked to other people about this, when a question is asked by whoever is reading the questions from the cards, a lot of times people will immediately think of an answer, but they went, "Oh, that was too easy. That can't be the right answer." And they go back and they think about it a little bit more before they answer the question, and they answer it with a different answer. And invariably, the first answer they thought of was truly the right answer, but they don't listen to their inner voice. And the result is that they say the wrong thing. We really need
Yeah.
to learn to listen to God, to listen to that inner voice that is guiding us. If you want to put it another way, our subconscious mind absorbs everything that goes on around us, everything that we're involved with. So it's all there if we want to learn to make use of it. And that inner voice is telling us what we need to know. But the problem is we don't listen to it. And that's the problem. Well, praying is really a whole lot of that. The fact is, what I need to do is to be asking for guidance about what I want to do. And I'll get a message whether that's really what I should be talking about or not. And I will act accordingly because I've learned to listen for those messages.
Yeah, that's well said. Well said, Mike. Well said. We just get so consumed about what's going on in our head. It takes over control. And
Yeah.
that's what we need to master, stop being all up there and start being like down here, in there, listening
Yeah.
to your heart and move forward. That is extremely well said. Yeah. Don't think there's anybody that could have said that better. Now, I'm just thinking, when you're talking about 9/11, and I find it so extraordinary. I mean, it's a day that nobody around the world that is still living today can forget.
Mhm.
You know, nobody can really get past that. I mean, I still clearly remember the day. I'm not sure whether I mentioned it the first time we spoke or not, but I was in the seventh grade, and that was primary school, and we had a school play that night, and I was one of those actors at the play, and everybody just started running towards the TV, when the planes hit, and I could have never imagined, so many years later, I'll be speaking to somebody who got out of the tower. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm watching the TV in primary school, the tower is going down, and you're telling me your story about how you got out with Roselle. And here we are having a conversation about it, you know? It's like,
Yeah.
wow, for me, personally speaking. Mike, do you feel that, you know, your book has so many different elements to it besides being a nonfiction about your experience on that day? But do you feel your book has also healed a lot of people who have read it?
Well, I hope that it's helped them. I hope that they've learned from it. Um, and that they will learn from it. I've talked to a number of people who've read it several times. I read it several times. I like it, but I've talked to people who have read it more than once. And if I'm able to even teach one person something that they didn't know, or teach them like a little bit more about dealing with blindness and blind people, if I've been able to inspire one person, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And besides healing, like people who weren't directly affected, by 9/11, is there any like chapters or elements in the book that can also heal people that suffered loss during that period?
Well, sure. I mean, there are several things throughout the book that do that. Um, I think there are a lot of people who can learn a lot from various aspects of it, and different people have read into it things that I didn't even think of, but they they have appreciated it because of things that they have learned. Um, so as I said, if Thunderdog inspires one person, then it's great. One thing that I think people need to learn, and a lot of people still haven't, is they talk about how Roselle led me down the stairs and out of the building. That is totally not true. First of all, guide dogs don't lead, they guide. It's not the dog's job to know where I want to go and how to get there. And unfortunately, people continue oftentimes to assume, oh, a blind person doesn't know where they're going to go. That's what the dog does. No, that's not what the dog does. The job of a guide dog is to make sure that I walk safely. It's my job to know where I want to go and how to get there. Which is why I was telling Roselle when we were running to go right, because I wanted her to go into the first opening that she could find, which we did. But Roselle's job is to guide and make sure that we walk safely. It's my job to know where to go and how to get there. Well, how do I know how to do that? How do you know how to do that? Intellectually, I know that you look at road signs and so on, and I don't necessarily get the opportunity to look at road signs or other things like that. I have other ways of getting information that I use to get the information that you get. One of the things I love to ask people, especially when I'm speaking to schools, is to tell me something that a blind person can't do. So, Kino, I'm going to ask you, tell me something that you think a blind person cannot do.
Well, I'm on the same frequency as you, and I am going to say that there is nothing that a blind person can't do. For me,
You're cheating, but
I,
that's okay. Because that's okay. So when I ask that question, the typical answer that I get first is driving a car. And I say, why can't a blind person drive a car? Well, they can't see the road. And I said, that's the wrong answer. The real answer is blind people traditionally cannot drive cars because we don't get the information that sighted people get through their eyes. However, having said that, in October of 2001, Mark Maurer, who was at that time the president of the National Federation of the Blind, challenged universities and private companies to develop the technology that would truly allow a blind person to get behind the wheel of a car and drive it like a sighted person could. And in 2011, that car was unveiled and demonstrated right before the Daytona Speedway Rolex 24 race in January of 2011. A gentleman named Mark Riccobono, another Mark, got into this car. It was a Ford Escape that was specially modified with equipment, not incredibly expensive equipment, but equipment that gave Mark the information through vibrating, tactile, haptic devices and so on. Not an autonomous vehicle, but truly a car where Mark had to take the active role of driving the car. So he started out on the Daytona Speedway, the oval 3.5 mile track. He drove for a little ways, and then there was an obstacle course. There were various barrels set up with enough space for him to drive through between them. And the information that he was getting from vibrating tactile devices allowed him to drive straight through the obstacle course without hitting a barrel, driving around and doing a variety of other things, including passing another vehicle on the course that was throwing boxes out at him that he had to avoid, and eventually drove all the way around the course very successfully. because he had technology in the car that gave him the information to drive. Now that car isn't still really ready for prime time, and I think that the reality is the way most sighted drivers drive, um, they wouldn't be able to do it either. I think the I'm waiting for autonomous vehicles to come along because I think that it's high time that we take driving out of the hands of drivers because too many people have accidents. Too many people think they own the road. People don't pay attention to the things that they should be, and they make life more dangerous for the rest of us. So I'm ready for
Yeah.
autonomous vehicles, but the reality is, it is possible for a blind person to drive a car because we can get the information that we need to in order to make that happen. And
Yeah.
that's really the issue. It's all about information. And the fact is, a blind person does have a way to get that information. And Mark Riccobono, and before him, when it was challenged, Mark Maurer, Dr. Maurer, proved it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I was having like a laugh out loud moment, thinking to myself that, the average person would say that, yeah, a blind person can't drive a car.
Hmm.
So many people out there in the world, as you said, that can see clearly, and we still got so many accidents on the road.
Oh, look, I think that the people who live around me here in Victorville certainly are a good justification for why we need autonomous vehicles. I don't know why I can't get a driver's license because I think I could drive as well as they can. I've been in some of those cars.
Exactly.
Yeah. But the reality is
Exactly.
blindness isn't the problem. It's people's attitudes. It's people's misconceptions. I
Yeah.
mentioned the National Federation of the Blind, which is the largest organization of blind people in the world, over 50,000 members in the United States. Back in the late 1970s and 19 and early 1980s, one of the problems that we had is we couldn't buy life insurance because insurance companies said anybody with a disability was a higher risk. We'd have to charge you so much money it wouldn't be worth it. We can't provide you with insurance. Well, insurance companies make their decisions based on what they call actuarial statistics, evidentiary data. They have specific mathematical models that that they create to to determine what insurance can cover and what it can't. And the reality is that one day a gentleman who is blind asked somebody from the insurance industry, "You've got these models that show that people with disabilities are a higher risk, right?" And the guy said, "Yeah." "Can we see the information? Can we see that evidence? Can we see those statistics?" And the gentleman said, "Sure." 6 months went by and they still hadn't produced them. You know why? Because the reality is they didn't have a single solitary bit of evidence or proof to say that a person, just because of a disability, was a higher risk than anybody else. And when we finally were able to demonstrate that, the National Federation of the Blind, along with a lot of other disabilities groups, went to every state in the union here in the United States and got every state to pass a law that said you can't discriminate against people with disabilities in providing insurance unless you have actuarial statistics or evidentiary data to show that. It has now been since 1985, so we're talking about now over 41 years. And the reality is, insurance companies don't have and can't have that information because disability isn't what causes the risk. It's perception that did. And we were denied insurance for hundreds of years simply out of prejudice. And that's, and again, another example of the kinds of things that really need to be addressed and dealt with because the reality is blindness isn't the problem. And that's what the National Federation of the Blind is constantly trying to teach people. That's what I try to teach people in Thunderdog. Blindness isn't the problem. Your attitudes and the limitations that you place on blind people are the real issue.
Yeah, agreed. Besides you, Mike, being an advocate, for all of this, via Thunderdog, I want to bring something else up on the screen. You also have your own company, Michael Hingson Group.
Yes.
So, what you've been talking about now and, what you are advocating for now and being the voice for people with disability around the world. Do you want to talk about the group?
Well, yeah, the group is me and I have one other person and my guide dog Alamo and Stitch, my cat. Um, So what I mostly do through the Michael Hingson group is I travel and speak. I ever since September 11th, people have wanted me to come and speak. And so I do a lot of traveling and speaking. I also work with a company called Accessibe, Accessibe. That's a capital B, but accessibe.com that makes a variety of different kinds of products and technologies that help make the internet more inclusive for a lot of people with a lot of different kinds of disabilities. And Accessibe started in 2018. And it's grown and it's evolved over the years. It started with what was called an Access widget that used artificial intelligence that worked to a degree in making websites accessible, but it's gone a long way from that. But I work with Accessibe and help, but I also do a lot of traveling and speaking. And I will say right now, if anybody wants a speaker to come and talk, whether it's telling my World Trade Center story or talking about other things or a combination of the two, I'm always looking for people who want to have a speaker come and talk with them. I do a lot of them. I'm here this week, but next week I'm going to be gone speaking. I will say that if people wish to reach out to me to talk about me speaking, it's real easy. My email address is speaker@michaelhingson.com. That's SPEAKER at MICHAELHINGSON.com. Would love to talk to anybody who wants to do that. But that's probably, well, that's what started the Michael Hingson group, and that's still the main thing that we do. It's all about creating material and helping to educate people about blindness, especially, and disabilities in general, and trying to help people refine their attitudes and recognize that, as you pointed out, everyone has a disability. Light dependence is just as much a disability as light independence is, because I don't happen to worry about whether the lights are on in a room. I've gotten into the habit when my wife has now passed away, but when my wife was alive, I was used to turning the lights on for her. I didn't need them for me, but I needed them for her, and had no problem doing that. So the fact of the matter is that we all have challenges, we all have things that we need to learn, but don't in any way limit somebody else just because you think that you're better than they are, because it's just not true.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. You know, and for anybody, I mean, out there that's listening right now, thinking to themselves, okay, if I go out and I purchase Thunderdog, this is just a non-fiction story, or it's more towards helping people with blindness. It's not true at all.
It's not. It is a
Whatever you may
general book.
ability you may have now, even if psychologically you're not well, I feel that your book can help them.
It's a book that is definitely about hope. It's a book that's about education. It is a book that says we all live on the same planet. We're all part of the same world, and we can all do it together.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Wow. Wow. There was one picture that got my attention that I did request, Mickey to send me today. And I've got it up on the screen now. And this is you with President George
George
W.
W.
Bush.
Bush, right? We I had met a congressman like about a year before, and he said, "I'd love to get you in to meet the president." I said, "I'd love to do that." And of course, all my Democratic friends said, "How could you go meet George Bush? He's a Republican. He's clueless." And I said, "He's the president." Anyway, it eventually was arranged, and we went back, and what we thought we were going to have was like about a 2-minute conversation with him. It ended up being about a 15-minute conversation, not just a photo opportunity, but we had a real conversation. In fact, um, he told us before he left, I've already been keeping the Italian prime minister waiting for me, because we were supposed to have a meeting, but he said, I wanted to really talk with you. So we kept the Italian prime minister waiting for a while. But we talked with President Bush for about 15 minutes, which was great.
Yeah, yeah. It must have been a great experience for you as well.
Oh,
You know.
it's the first time I've been in the Oval Office, and it's the only time I've been in the Oval Office. But yeah, it was an honor to do. Um, and I met other people, Hillary Clinton, Senator Chuck Schumer, Lisa Beamer and Queen Noor and I were all on the same Larry King show in November of 2001. And Roselle and Hillary developed quite a thing. So that
Yeah,
was kind
yeah,
of fun. But the reality is that, we're all in the same world. We're all part of the same planet, and no one
yeah,
should think they're better than anyone else.
yeah, 100%. And I mean, like what you were saying about your democratic friends, when a country goes through something so terrible as 9/11, we shouldn't be looking at Republican versus Democrat. You know, that's when the whole
Yeah.
country needs to be unified.
Well, and for a while it was. We had such unity over here for a year and a half, and then things started to disintegrate a little bit, and it's gotten a whole lot worse. But the reality is, there was so much unity right after September 11th. It was great.
Yeah. That's sad, and
It
you
is.
see it happening all around the world, it
Yeah.
takes like a tragic to happen. One of my favorite podcasts that I love to listen to is called Philosophize This. And, this dude takes like a deep dive into what like a play or literature is really telling us about the world.
Hmm.
And one of the episodes I listened to was Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And I mean, I remember when I was in high school, we had to do Romeo and Juliet, but what we were taught by Romeo and Juliet is not what we actually supposed to take away from it. And one of these conclusions, the host of the podcast was that after the tragic deaths of Romeo and Juliet, that actually brought the two families together.
Hmm.
So it takes a tragedy to actually happen in the world for people to be like, whoa, we need to come together now to get
And
through this because
and
that's
one
the only way.
and one has to wonder what fears those families created that caused them to hate each other so much that finally went away after the death of Romeo and Juliet. And, that happens so much.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, and we shouldn't, as the human race, be waiting for a tragedy to happen to, be one, be together.
Yeah.
Support each other.
Yeah.
But it's just how it is, it's just how it is. I mean, we can use a basic example of a family, right? It takes a death in the family to bring all the family members together again.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Something so simple.
Yeah. It's too bad it
Yeah.
takes some of those dramatic things to do it. But if that's what happens, that's what happens.
Yeah. But I mean, at least we got you, Mike, and we got Thunderdog that is contributing towards humanity, and I am thankful for you. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. One of these days we'll get a chance to come over and I'll get to meet you in person. Find
Yeah.
find us find us some speaking opportunities over there. Would love to do it.
So when it comes to your speaking opportunities, it's also international.
Oh yes.
Nice.
I will be flying to Canada in June and I will be flying to Australia in August.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So that's something to look into. That's something to look
Oh
into.
sure,
Let
absolutely
me
it
keep
is.
an eye out for you. Let me keep an eye out for you. Any organizations that fits, your profile. And why not? Why not?
Well, and the reality is it
Up
isn't
and reach out. Yeah. Yeah.
and the reality is it's not just about September 11th. I talk about
Yeah.
I've lived a life where I've learned a lot about leadership and trust and teamwork, emergency preparedness and safety and a variety of things. So I really can cross a lot of different kinds of theme boundaries and so on. So, but at the same time, I think there is a lot to be said for integrating my story into what I talk about. But I work with event sponsors who want me to come and speak, and we include the messaging that they want me to include. So I'm very perfectly capable of customizing and do customize every talk that I give. I don't have something written out and I don't just read a speech. Every talk is
Uh,
different.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yep, I still hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you. Yes.
Okay, yeah, we're back. We got cut off
Huh.
for a moment.
Yeah. What I was saying was basically, I talk across different boundaries and so on, so it's easy to customize every talk that I give, which is what I do. I want people who want me to come and speak. I want them to guide me to make sure that I talk about the things that they want in a speech. And so I customize every talk that I give.
Yeah. And listeners can also tune into your podcasts, once
Mhm.
again titled Unstoppable Mindset Podcast,
Right.
which I'm sure you can find on all streaming platforms, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And you got still 2 episodes out per week.
Yep. We publish 2
Yeah.
episodes a week.
Nice. So, Mike, any final words from your side?
I just hope that maybe we've been able to help people think a little bit. Um, I think Franklin Roosevelt was absolutely right when he said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. We really need to stop worrying about everything so much and focus on the things over which we really have some control. We'll be a lot better off, all of us, if we do that. And so I'm willing to help any way that I can.
Yeah. And this is what makes you such a great speaker, Mike. This is the second episode we have been together, and you always concluded with something so powerful. you know, like the takeaway is just great. It's on point.
Well,
Oh, you did it last year, you did it this year again.
if you have a couple minutes, I would be glad to read you something from Thunderdog, which
Yeah,
I think,
please,
okay,
please.
let me get my notes here. Um, so in Thunderdog, there is a section near the end of the book called Guide Dog Wisdom. It's lessons that I learned from Roselle on 2011. And actually, Susie created a lot of this, but again, we did work it together. And so I think it'll be great if I share that. So let me um, get into Guide Dog Wisdom. And let me find this because I think it's really very useful to be something that I think people will find relevant. So let me find it. I had it here in a second ago. Um, let's see. Um, but it's it's about as I said, lessons I learned from Roselle on September 11th, which is, I think, really important. Um, but I'm trying to find it, and I thought that I had it right handy, but you can't trust me. Um, there it is. Okay. Guide Dog Wisdom. So this is, and it's in Thunderdog. So anyone who gets Thunderdog will be able to read it. But let me read this to you. There are 10 lessons that I learned from Roselle, and they go like this. Number one, there's a time to work and a time to play. Know the difference. When the harness goes on, it's time to work. Work hard. Others are depending on you. Number two, focus in and use all of your senses. Learn to tell the difference between a harmless thunderstorm and a true emergency. Don't let your sight get in the way of your vision. Number three, sometimes the way is hard, but if you work together, someone will pass along a water bottle just when you need it. That actually happened as we were going down the stairs. Number four, Roselle's favorite, and if you want to hear the history behind this, you'll have to get me to come in as a speaker. But number four, always kiss firefighters. That's Roselle's favorite. Number five, ignore distractions. There's more to life than playing fetch or chasing tennis balls. Number six, listen carefully to those who are wiser and more experienced than you. They'll help you find the way. Number seven, don't stop until work is over. Sometimes being a hero is just doing your job. Number eight, the dust cloud won't last forever. Keep going and look for the way out. It will come. Number nine, shake off the dust and move on. Remember the first guide dog command, forward. And number 10, when work is over, play hard with your friends and don't forget to share your favorite Bodabone. So those are guide dog lessons that I learned, as I said, from Roselle that we thought would be relevant in Thunderdog. And that really, between all 10 of those, they really summarized the whole book in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it may be labeled as guide dog lessons, but
Guide dog wisdom.
yeah, that's a lot of wisdom, for an average person, just like myself now, just listening to that. Wow, you know, there's a lot to take away from that. A lot to take away from that. Yeah. So, Mike, thank you for sharing once again and for being so awesome. And where can people find you online?
So they can go to www.michaelhingson.com. That's www.michaelhingson.com. I'm also very visible on LinkedIn. They can search for Michael Hingson and find me there without any difficulty. Those are probably the biggest places. We are on Facebook and on a number of the social media sites, not on Instagram because it's pretty graphic. And although I have an account, I don't really do much on it. I think we're on TikTok, but I don't do much with that again because it's very graphic. So LinkedIn primarily, but again, www.michaelhingson.com, or people can reach out to me. Again, it's speaker, SPEAKER, at Michael Hingson, MICHAELHINGSON.com.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Even though TikTok might be, as you mentioned, graphic, if you had to find like a good content creator, I mean, you could make some awesome videos, with the technological tools out there, with guide dogs.
Well, there's some of that we're working on some of that. It's just that I don't personally post a lot on it, but there's somebody who's
Yeah.
helping with videos. So we're getting some stuff done. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice, nice. Well, at least you're all over the show, That's just fortunately and unfortunately
Yeah.
what needs to be done in 2026.
I
Mike, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Just one more question before you go. Your book is available in all formats on Amazon.
Correct. It's available. It's also an Audible. It's available in all formats in a variety of languages and so on. All of the books are actually, so people can find them.
Nice. Nice. Mike, thank you so much. And for what's to come in 2026 and beyond that, I wish you nothing but the best. And we just never know what can happen. I may just see you live and speaking in South Africa one day.
Hope so. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be fun. VIP ticket for me, please.
Absolutely.
There we go. There we go. Mike, thank you so much. God bless you. And please have an awesome day and an awesome week ahead.
God bless you as well. Thank you very much for
Right.
having
Thank you,
us.
Mike. Right. See you later. Bye.